Hello, my name is Craig Ferguson, and I'm excited to share with you today a video summary of my dissertation, which is Blending Spirits, a Joint Congregational Resource Team. My thesis is that a Joint Congregational Resource Team provides a better model of leadership and adaptive ministry in our rapidly changing culture. As the title implies, a Joint Congregational Resource Team, hereafter referred to as a JCRT, is composed of individuals from several congregations, potentially even translocal congregations, who come together to create a blended ecology, a diverse group, where their objective becomes creating an incarnational community presence and to facilitate congregational missional transformation. As I began my dissertation, I began by talking about the multifaceted challenges that the church is facing today. I specifically identify 6 of those challenges in such that I believe a JCRT is able to address and help overcome each of these challenges. The challenges that I've defined, first of all, the first challenge is the decline of church membership and involvement. And of course that's well known, but I reference Barna and Pew to talk about what has happened and where we're at. The second challenge that I address are technical problems that the church faces and the need for adaptive solutions. The JCRT in itself is an adaptive solution, but because of the way that it works together creatively in community, it also helps uncover many more adaptive and creative solutions. The third challenge that I address is entrenched systems and structures, including institutional impedance. The truth is, I'm a member of the United Methodist Church, and I've grown to love my connectional system. The denomination that I'm a part of has a global connection, and the system and structures that we have help us work together. However, those structures and systems can sometimes interfere with creativity or adaptivity. The fourth challenge I address is congregational complacence and the fear of change. Most churches I've been a part of, they create a pattern of life, a way of doing things, and I'm sure you've seen this as well. And all of a sudden it becomes a challenge, if it's at all possible, to change or do something different. The fifth challenge that I address is this division that has taken place over time of paid professional staff and clergy and the ministry of the laity. And I talk a little bit about a commissional kind of aspect, how we can bridge that gap and have everyone facilitating ministry together. The sixth challenge that I address is contextual relevance in our communities. Many churches over time just simply grow to the point where they're doing ministry for themselves within a building, and they realize that they've stopped connecting with the community around them, in such that quite often they don't even have members in their local community. Everyone is driving in, and they're not even sure what activities or otherwise are taking place in the community. It is my belief that a JCRT is able to address and overcome each of these challenges and I just talk about this in dialogue with other proposals that are out there today. Some of the proposals that I address in my dissertation come from Roxburgh, James, Bolsinger, and Beck. And as I discuss, many of their proposals align significantly with key aspects that are rooted in the JCRT. However, I most significantly note that there is a gap in these proposals that the JCRT addresses, because the JCRT notes the value of translocal and diverse connection, blending the gifts and perspectives to identify and engage a culturally relevant missional opportunity. And this is something that happens even more so with greater diversity and more translocal communities. Once I set the foundation for my dissertation, talking about what a JCRT is and the challenges that it's able to address in dialogue with other authors, I take a step back and talk about the biblical foundation and the theological implications of a JCRT. Because the truth is, a JCRT does not align with traditional divisions of denominations, or even the divisions that happen between local churches that somehow learn that they can't play nice together. Rather, a JCRT is focused in on the missional activity of the triune God who is already out in front of us in community, and the participatory role of a blended ecology of individuals, communities, even translocal communities, and congregational groups. As such, I spend time in dialogue with Wolff, theologians like Wolff and Collier and Torrance, and I talk about how JCRT reflects or embodies a Trinitarian ecclesiology, how it aligns with the essence of the church and church structure, how it is able to utilize the diverse gifts of individuals and the unique ministries of churches. Finally, I talk about the missiological significance of a JCRT's blended ecology and translocal perspective. After I lay the foundation of theological implications, and then I move from there into a proposal, what it might look like to create, develop, and implement a JCRT in a community. As such, I do so in dialogue with authors like Boren, Roxburgh, Hartwig, and Bird, and others. So let me take just a moment to share with you each of these three steps: creation, development, and implementation. In the creation process, the first thing that is needed is to identify a pioneer. And this pioneer is a leader who clearly understands the purpose, the process, and can communicate a compelling vision to others. This pioneer, of course, needs to be undergirded with prayer for discernment and direction. After the pioneer is identified and begins to work, the first step is to identify participating groups. And there's a figure over here that represents what that might look like. Identifying these, as I refer to, coalition churches. Churches who are willing to support a program like a JCRT and work together to engage in their community. The first step after identifying those churches is to pull out individuals who are leaders, potentially pastors or leaders on boards and committees, who are willing to be a part of a steering committee. This steering committee, I want to clarify, is not meant to manage or oversee or direct a JCRT, but to help facilitate and actually to help curate a process. Now here I'm going to quote from Roxburgh. He says that curating involves creating spaces for interacting, listening, sharing, and making decisions the people can own and invest in implementing. After the steering committee is in place and they understand their role, then they need to be a part of selecting individual team members that can come from each church to become a part of this JCRT. In figure 2, you'll note how each church then supplies an individual who would be a part of the JCRT. I take some time to talk a little bit about some of the characteristics that you want to look for in individual members. The truth is, you're not looking just for somebody who will volunteer, somebody who's not busy, or somebody who's got the time. You're looking for some very specific characteristics. Someone who's got credibility, aptitude, leadership skills, availability, humility, and I reference several more in conversation with authors like Banks, Ledbetter, and Boren. Another characteristic that you really want to make sure you are integrating into this JCRT is intentional diversity. This intentional diversity includes things like spiritual gifts and personality types. And you can use resources like DISC Profile or Myers-Briggs or Enneagram to identify the different personality types. You want to make sure that even though members are coming from different churches, potentially translocal communities, that they are still bringing diversity to the group as a whole. Another area that is referenced as vital to make sure you've got diversity in is in community. Sparks references 4 new areas, new commons of community that are areas that the church should be involved in. You want individuals who are already active in their communities, specifically in the areas of economy, environment, civics, and education. As you engage with individuals who are already connected in their communities this way, they bring a deep insight and richer understanding of what is taking place in the community. Once the JCRT is in place, then their mission becomes to be engaged in community. And figure 3 up here represents what that looks like to do ascending into the community, potentially a commissioning service. But before they're set free, the first thing that needs to happen is the team needs to understand their role of developing high trust and vulnerability with each other, and their commitment to communication, high-end communication with the steering committee and with their coalition churches, so that there's a sense of trust that's built into each of those systems as well. I also make sure that before they get going, they understand their purpose. And this is vital as well. I reference Mancini's 5 C's here, where a purpose statement needs to be clear and concise, compelling, catalytic, and contextual. The reality is if a team doesn't have a purpose statement that is clear and concise and meets all these criteria, they might begin to flounder or wonder what it is that they're doing. It is a purpose statement that sets the course for the team. As I get going, I talk a little further about some of the principles in which they are able to engage with one another, how they interact together, how they relate to their coalition churches, and how they begin to engage in community. After we've created this JCRT, put the structure, the rough structure in place, then we begin a development stage. And I recommend a development stage, honestly, that should be at a minimum of a year, because it takes time to develop relationships and trust and to be integrated in community in ways to create adaptive programming or opportunities. And the truth is, many committees that get started at churches, they just want to go. And they take the initiative and they come up with an idea, they make it happen, and they feel like they've accomplished something. But a JCRT is intended to be organic and to work by building up relationships and connections. So I encourage teams to spend time in communing with God, in relating to one another, and learning to engage in their community. And that step is something that I bring in Roxburgh into the conversation and share his 5 practices, because I believe these 5 practices can be utilized in community in many opportunities. He talks about listening, discerning, testing, reflecting, and then deciding how to be engaged. And I believe this is a process that can happen over and over again as a team is becoming aware of needs or recognizing activities, beginning to learn their community all over again. Along with this, there are activities such as prayer mapping or prayer walking, listening in neighborhoods and communities, seeing things that individuals haven't seen before, potentially engaging in school board meetings or going to school activities, attending city council meetings or neighborhood association meetings, becoming aware of what is happening around them. In this whole development process, the thing that is intended to take place is that this JCRT team is learning to become incarnational community presence. And they're also helping facilitate congregational missional transformation as they bring information back to their coalition churches to share what they're witnessing and the needs around them and opportunities for them to engage in. After the team has been created and spent some time in development, the next stage, of course, would be implementation or integration. And to do that, the team really needs to clarify their own structure, how they're working together and bringing ideas back. And here I lean on the concept from Hartwig and Bird that they mention called first among equals. The reality is every team member should be valued for who they are, for their diversity, for the church they come from and the gifts that their church has to offer, the community that they're a part of. But because of the involvement of a JCRT and the things that they'll be doing in community, there may be a time when one person or another person is raised to a place of leadership because of their education or because of their current involvement in their community and awareness of what's happening. But every gift should be seen as, every person should be seen as equals, sharing in part. And then they have the opportunity, of course, to bring back that information to their local church. Here's where the challenge might arise, because so often churches have well-established systems. And usually it's a hierarchical system, a structure that holds everyone together with a board chairperson or president. And sometimes it's a challenge to integrate a system of first among equals with that which is a hierarchical system. But what I suggest here is that each coalition church recognizes the JCRT as potentially an extension ministry or a parachurch ministry, where they are seen as community advisors who are engaged in community and can bring information to the board meetings and give opportunities for the churches to make decisions, whether they want to engage in this opportunity or that opportunity, one at a time or all together. The whole idea of the implementation stage is to help empower the JCRT as a team and to continue to communicate with coalition churches and steering committees. In my dissertation, I suggest this proposal of the stages of creating, developing, and implementing. And after I'm done with that, I actually am able to give a narrative account. Because my current appointment is such that I am currently serving a new church start in an urban community that meets at an elementary school. I also serve a country church 20 miles away that's out in the middle of the country. It's an established church, a heritage church that's been there 165 years. Also, as this was beginning, I was able to help facilitate a new house church that was being planted in a community 2 hours away. 3 very radically different communities with different individuals, gift sets in each church. And I was able to bring together a group of individuals, leaders from each team, to participate in a JCRT. So in this narrative account, I share our own experiences. I share the things that worked well, how we went through those stages of creation, development, and implementation, the things that we did right, and maybe the things that we could have improved on or made further refinements on. I also talk a little bit about the impact of COVID, of the shifts, the cultural shifts and of the pandemic and otherwise that impacted us. After I share the narrative account of what actually took place, then I take some time in a stage of talking about it, the evaluation. How did the JCRT work? How did it function? Was it successful or not successful? And here's where I jump back to the 6 challenges that the church is facing that I discussed in chapter 1. And I address one by one how the JCRT was able to successfully overcome these challenges and the benefits that they brought to each community. And of course, each being different because they're different communities. I also share some of the beautiful, adaptive, and creative ideas that were birthed out of the JCRT during this time frame, and some stories of that, as well as some quotes from individual members. Finally, in the conclusion, I take some time to share my overarching learning and also to talk about some of the potential follow-up ideas, specifically taking a closer look at developing steering teams and working with pastors and churches that might be stuck in old models. This is my proposal. This is my dissertation, Blending Spirits, a Joint Congregational Resource Team. I'm very excited about the potential that it has and that I have witnessed, and I look forward to talking with any of you further about any questions you may have, or also potentially starting a JCRT in your community. God bless.